Alright guys, welcome back to another episode of Mustang Mowers. What we have here today is a Montgomery Ward walk-behind Edger. I picked this up at an estate sale. It came with 3 other engines that I bought, so stay tuned, you'll see those in upcoming videos. But I thought this was kind of cool because it has a 3 horsepower Briggs and Stratton flathead engine on it. This was kind of the heyday of Briggs and Stratton. Like you're never gonna find a better small engine built than that right there. Briggs and Stratton and Tecumseh were in the forefront of small engines when this came out. And Tecumseh obviously went belly up. So I know absolutely nothing about this Edger. The people that I got it from didn't know anything about it either. They said that their stepdad was a bit of a tinkerer and loved to work on small engines, but this was found stuffed way back in the back of a shed. So I know nobody knows anything about this. So what I'm going to do is kind of slow down a little bit and go through a video basically of describing what we do to figure out the health of the engine. So let me get it up here on the bench so we can see what we're doing, and I'll bring you guys back in. Alright, we got it up here on the bench. So looking at it, I mean, I noticed some oil residue kind of on the frame of this thing, but I don't see anything outwardly that's alarming to me. It doesn't seem like there's a massive oil leak or anything like that. My biggest concern at first is if there's rust inside this tank, because these tanks are not necessarily difficult to come by, but when you find them, they're very, very expensive. So let me look, grab a light so we can see in here. Oh, that's clean. I can see some trash down on the bottom of it, but that is awesome. I don't know how well you can see that in there, but that looks amazing. Okay, so let's check and see if the choke linkage is not seized up, so that's a plus. What about the throttle? Nope, carburetor linkage is functioning like it should. At least I think it is. Yep, it's functioning like it should. Okay, so those are both very good signs. Let's see how much oil it's got in it. Ow. I don't see none. Hang on. Yeah, it's got some down in there. I don't know that you'll be able to see it, but it's low, obviously. The oil looks pretty rough. Okay, so let's go through how we would kind of diagnose these to make sure that these engines are in proper running order. The first thing I'm going to do is pull the air cleaner off of it so I can get a look down in through the throat of the carburetor, see what condition the air filter is in, and then kind of from there we'll work our way around. We'll check the spark plug, pull it out, see the condition of the spark plug. We'll read it and see how this engine's really running, and then we might pull this front cover off to get down to the coil. It says it's electronic ignition, so that tells me it shouldn't be a points and condenser ignition system. It should be electronic. So we'll check the condition of the coil itself. We might do some resistance readings on it to see how well it's actually performing. But let me get this air cleaner off, guys, and I'll bring you back. So if this gives you any indication about how long this is sitting, that is a dirt dauber nest. Dirt daubers are a bad problem in northeast Oklahoma. I'm not sure where you guys are at or if you have the same amount of problems we have with them, but dirt daubers are a big problem in this part of the country. Down in here, peel that off. Okay. Yep, that choke is working just like it should. Put this down in here. I love that magnetic icon light. Okay, so choke is operating just like it should. I don't see any trash down in the carburetor, which is good. The air filter itself outside the dirt dauber nest actually doesn't look that terrible. I mean, it's obviously used, but doesn't look terrible. So let me get that cleaned off. We'll stick it back in there. Looks like you can hear the linkage in there moving, so that's a good sign. A lot of times what you'll find is these little rubber boots. So this is a pickup tube or a breather tube that goes down, runs down and into the side of the valve cover, kind of back underneath that carburetor where the carburetor hooks in. There's a valve cover in there, and that rubber grommet connects on the, there's a rubber grommet that connects the breather tube to the valve cover, and then that breather tube runs right up alongside the carb, and then there's another rubber grommet right here that goes into the side of the carburetor. That's the kind of the pulse, if you will, to draw fuel up through the carburetor. It's kind of basically your fuel pump. A lot of times you'll see that these rubber grommets will go bad. I actually have another set of them up here for another project, but I can probably spare those for this one. So all in all, the carburetor itself looks good without pulling it completely apart. Now I would imagine, because there's diaphragms on, there's actually a side plate right here. There's 4 screws that hold this side plate on, and, or excuse me, 5 screws that hold this side plate on, and there's a diaphragm underneath there, and that pulsing is what causes fuel to come up, because this is a different style carburetor than kind of what you see on the Honda clone engines, because there's actually the carburetor itself is mounted to the fuel tank, and there's a pickup tube that goes straight through the bottom of the carburetor into the bottom of the tank, and that's what draws fuel up. And there's actually a small canister on the underneath side of the carburetor that acts kind of like the bowl for the carburetor that you would see, like a bowl on one of those Honda clone engines. So these diaphragms pull the fuel up and store it into that bowl, if you will, that little container, and that's what draws air through, or that's what air coming through draws the fuel up from that container and into the engine to cause it to work. So the one thing I haven't checked yet, I guess I probably should have started with this. The one thing I haven't checked is the engine locked up? So kind of give it an easy, oh no, it's not locked. Actually, it seems to be running pretty smooth. Okay, I like it. So let me get my tools so I can pull this spark plug out, and we'll read the spark plug. I'll show you guys how to read it, and then we'll go through and see what we can see down inside the top side of the piston. All right, guys, I'm gonna try to do this with my phone propped up. It's, in case you can't tell, it's kind of low budget filming here, so I hope the phone doesn't fall off of where I have it. It's pretty sketchy, so we'll see. Okay, so I'm actually kind of okay with what I see here. I don't know how well you'll be able to see it, if it'll even come into focus here. But, so you've got your grounding strap that runs across the top side, and that little piece right there in the very center, it's called the electrode. So what you're looking for is the burn, if you will. You can see how this part of the grounding strap is lighter than the back side, and what you're kind of looking for is for it to be right there in the middle, which tells you that this thing is operating just about as efficient as it can. I don't see a lot of carbon buildup, which is also another good sign. The gap seems to be pretty narrow on it, so we'll re-gap that here in just a minute. But okay, so let me pull this. The piston comes up. We're going to look down in here. I see a little bit of scoring on the piston walls, or on the cylinder walls, but I don't see a whole lot. It's not indicative that the engine's bad, it's just indicative that it's used, and that's okay. Looking on the top side of the piston, I don't see a lot of carbon buildup on there either, which is awesome. But I'll tell you something that I like to do. Lost my light. Something that I like to do when I have these engines like this that, good Lord, when I have these engines like this that haven't run in a long time, is I'll take just a little bit of Marvel Mystery Oil, and I'll put down in here right on the top side of that piston, and I'll just slowly work the pull handle so that it can kind of lubricate those rings. That way, if those rings are stuck at all, it'll kind of free them up and it'll lubricate this. That way, when we go to start pulling on it to start it, it won't be dry, it'll be lubricated. So give me just a second, let me grab Mystery Oil. So I don't know about you guys, but I'm a huge fan of Vice Grip Garage, and he talks about Marvel Mystery Oil. He says, well, what's in it? I don't know, it's a mystery. We've used this stuff for years and we like it. So let me get just a little bit. I don't want to put too much in here because I don't want to cause anything to carbon up or gum up or anything like that. So let me get, I bought something today while I was at the store to hopefully help with that. Just bear with me while I fumble around. As you can see, I'm not using a whole lot. I just want to put a little bit in there, make sure that piston's down towards the bottom. Put that in there, just kind of slowly work it. Alright, the other thing that we would probably do is try to do a compression check on this engine. See how much compression is in that cylinder wall, or in that cylinder. So, I've got a compression test kit here. That one fits. Okay. Screw that in there good. So when you do a compression test, you want to have the throttle opened all the way up so that it gets as much airflow in there as possible so that you get an accurate reading. And then you just want to pull it like you would normally start it. When I do this, if the phone falls off again, I'll try to prop it up somewhere better, but let's give it a shot. Alright, so we've got, I don't know how well you can see this or not, but we're looking at probably pretty close to 50 psi, which for a bigger engine that's pretty low, but on something this small, probably okay. Should be all right. Be enough to try to at least start it anyway. So. The other thing we need to check, oh, dadgummit. I put this whole thing away. I forgot to put this adapter in. Of course, it's my luck. Bear with me. All right. So let's work on trying to get this spark plug cleaned up, and then we'll check and see if we have spark, okay? So what I want to do is try to clean up all these areas here where it's kind of carboned up. And you can see that carbon. Get this cleaned up, see if we can clean the bottom side of the grounding strap and that electrode. And the way I do that, I mean, if I was at the shop, we've got an actual spark plug cleaner. And if you have one of those, I caution you about overusing it. And the reason for that is because there's a media in that, like real fine sand particles. So it's basically a small sandblaster is what it is, and it cleans all of that stuff up real good. And it does a good job cleaning it up. The problem is it leaves those little sand particles in there. So you've got to blow it out real good with shop air and make sure you get all that stuff out of there so that you're not introducing foreign material into the engine when it's trying to run. So it's going to take you some real fine grit sandpaper. I think this is 120 grit. You could probably even go a little finer than that if you wanted. But just kind of give it a once over. You can see how it's started to clean up that electrode in the middle. Alright, let me grab my gapper. See. Should be somewhere around 30 thousandths. Which is going to be right there. Yeah, it's gapped just a little too tight. It's at about 25 thousandths. So let's open this up just a skosh. Right about there. I don't know how well you can see that, but that looks better. All right, so now I don't necessarily care for that type of spark plug connector for the coil because you see exactly, it's just a metal loop and it gets kind of loose in there. I prefer the rubber boot, but I mean we're dealing with what we deal with here. So let's check and see if it has spark. First off, let me get a pair of pliers. See if I can kind of bend that back down just a little bit. Have it make decent connection on that spark plug. There we go. Alright. So what we're going to do is lay this to where it's touching metal, obviously, so it grounds. And I'm going to pull this pull rope again, and we're going to see. Hopefully you can see down in there if we're getting decent spark. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, we're getting good spark down in there. Good. Okay. So, put this spark plug back in. Doesn't need to be real tight. Okay. So I guess now we're just ready to throw a little bit of fuel in here. See if it'll bark off. So here's also another thing that I like to do. When you get these engines like this that have been sitting for a while, especially these diaphragms in here in this carburetor. The diaphragms can get dried out, which means if they get dried out, they're not pulsing like they should, so they're not going to be pulling fuel. Inside the engine, your valves get dried out, and they get a little gummy. So I like to run a little bit of this Marvel Mystery Oil mixed in with the fuel. It doesn't take much, just a little bit mixed in with the fuel, so that as it's pumping through, it's getting onto those diaphragms and it's lubricating those up, and it'll a lot of times will bring those back around. So let me get some. I don't have any mixed up right now. Let me get some mixed up, and I'll bring you guys back in for first start. Okay, so I've got some fuel mixed up with a little bit of that Marvel Mystery Oil. I've got it in the tank already. I'm going to try to pull on it, choke it a little bit and pull on it to see if those diaphragms will actually pull some of that fuel up. If it won't do it, then I'll pour a little bit of that fuel on the top side or through the throat of that carburetor. Because we poured a little bit of Marvel Mystery Oil on top of that piston, it's probably going to smoke a little bit when it first fires up, but let's see what it does. I thought it so. All right, let me pour a little bit in here and see if it'll run. Well, there you go. It's kind of sitting there idling. Carburetor probably needs a little bit of work done to it, which probably end up being a separate video here. But all in all, it's not terrible. I'm going to let it run just a little bit so I can draw that fuel up into that diaphragm. See if it'll clear itself up here in just a minute. But there you have it. I have no idea how long this thing had been sitting. Like I said, we found it in the back of a shed, buried underneath a bunch of stuff. It's a pretty cool looking little unit. Remember my dad had one of these when I was a kid. So, not too bad for sitting for who knows how long. So, we'll end up doing another video on this. I don't know that we'll call it a series, so to speak. But we'll do another video of probably pull the engine off of it and get it all cleaned up real good, kind of a restoration type deal. Get the oil changed in it and then get it ready for spring. This will be my new Edger. All right. Thanks guys for watching the video. If you would, like the video. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, please subscribe. There'll be a lot of content like this coming up. Find us on Facebook, Mustang Mowers. Find us on the internet, MustangMowersUlagod.com. I'll put links in the video description down at the bottom. If you have any questions, feel free to comment. We will reply back to all the commenters. Thank you.